Is a thought leader, as well as how can you be one? What are some of the actual specific steps you can take? What are the behaviors and actions that you can take to move yourself on that journey from leader to thought leader? So I'd like to start by beginning with a series of stories, and those stories begin with someone that I think pretty much everybody recognizes over on the right, which is Sheryl Sandberg. I think of Sheryl Sandberg as really one of the people who has epitomized this concept of becoming a thought leader. And what's so interesting about the way she did this is, of course, she is a very well known and accomplished leader, but it wasn't because she was the COO of Facebook that really built this credibility, but it was really around a big idea of lean in. And the big idea had been around for many years. I'm sure no one would say that she was the first to come up with it. But her belief was that by creating community and by creating lean in circles, that she could actually move that idea forward, helping women to advance their careers. And as a result, now there's thousands of these lean in circles around the world, and they have been built into companies and communities and various organizations, and have really given women the tools to move their careers in positive directions. Another person who I love to tell the story of is Ron Finley. So Ron Finley calls himself the gangsta gardener, is one of the phrases that he uses about himself. And he, it's also maybe another way to say it is the guerrilla gardener, which might be the more polite way, but I really like gangsta gardener. But his concept, and I don't know how many of you have heard of him, but he created an entire movement around healthy eating in South Central LA. And he began by planting a garden in his front yard, and then began to gain agreement within the community that they needed to be planting gardens in vacant lots, in behind homeless shelters, in any place that there was a small plot of land, and then engage the community in bringing healthy food to South Central, which was just basically one strip mall after another. Over time, as those gardens grew in more ways than one, he also began to share this idea of how can you do this in your community. And he created a TED Talk, created a website, and he's really built an entire following around this movement. And this was not his day job. He's an artist, but this became something that he cared so much about that he built this movement around it. And then there's Vaughn Quinlivan. Vaughn is the former director of workforce at Pacific Gas and Electric, which is a 100-year-old company. For those of you who live in California, it's a 100-year-old utility company, 80% union, and she became a change agent within the company to increase diversity of PG&E's workplace. She sparked change both in her company, but then across her industry. She created a unique industry community partnership called Power Pathway, and she was one of my first clients working in this journey from leader to thought leader. Over time, she went from being completely unknown in the community college, in Pacific Bell, to well known within her industry, testifying in front of the U.S. Senate, recognized by the White House, and eventually headhunted by the governor to do the same sort of work now at the state level. So she's working across California on workforce issues, really established herself in a very short period of time as a thought leader in her industry. So I tell those stories because I think that they help us with this conversation about where are we on the journey from leader to thought leader? What is a thought leader? And I want to start by even just asking this group, it's like, where are you on the journey from thought leader to thought leader? So Ash, I will just say, I don't see the poll, so maybe you could launch that here. I don't see a very early stage. Somebody says, trying to figure out how to position myself. I'm at the beginning of my journey to be a thought leader, not well established yet, in the midst of a career transition. Another person says, just beginning to take the first steps. I have a lot of ideas, but I don't know how to disseminate them. So a lot of people at the beginning stages, which of course is why you're here. And others who say, I don't really know. What is a thought leader? And so others say, I'm taking a few baby steps. So this is great, a brand new concept for some people, and those who are on the journey, and others who are getting on the way, but maybe a little diffuse in their activities. So thank you all. You've done a great job. And here's the thing. I'm going to ask Maya at the end and the Emerge team to actually pick from the responses to questions and to things that I'm doing, and throwing in your own questions. We're going to give away a book to somebody today who's had shared some high impact question or input today. So I really appreciate everybody jumping in here. People saying, I'm 14 years into my career. My ideas are still developing, but I have lots of energy and vision and a strong network. I'm testing the waters. Others say I'm beginning in a larger sense, but I'm something of a thought leader in developmental disabilities. So that was Elizabeth Thompson. So thank you all. Let's move on and let's jump into, for those who don't know what a thought leader, I thought I would start here with a little bit of a definition. So this is the serious question that we should always begin every program where we're talking about thought leadership, is to define a thought leader. And I think of thought leaders as people who are, well, people who can get their PowerPoints to work. That's a thought leader. That would be the key here. Sorry, I'm having technical challenges over here, but I'm sure we're going to get them resolved. There we go. Okay, so I think of thought leaders as change agents. They begin as change agents, people who are building change in a community, in an organization, in an industry, in a process, and then they try to inspire others to join that change, to come along with their ideas. They're often innovators, but they understand that it's not just about change as an individual. It's not just change in my team, but isn't there a way that perhaps I could replicate and scale those ideas? So it's one thing, for example, for Cheryl to say, you know, I should lean into my career, which she did. Others to say maybe for her staff, but what about this broader idea? This idea then of building fans and followers around this change, and in order to influence sustainable change. It's one thing, again, for us to maybe make a change individually, but over time, if we can get others on board, that's when we can really make sustainable change. So that's how I define thought leaders and people who are establishing their niche. The next thing I want to talk about here, if I can find a way to do that. Okay, so I think about thought leaders as people who make an impact. They often make this impact beginning internally, internal to their company, organization, entity, whatever, where they're working. They then build a peer network. They build a group of people who want to make that change with them, or who can be influenced to move something forward similarly in their company or their organization or their team or their department. Then they perhaps work cross-industry. They work at a state level or a regional level, and then over time have a national and a global impact. That's really the longer term hope. It doesn't always happen that way, but that is often what happens when you want to build a movement. I also think about thought leaders as people who have what I call a what if. What do I mean by that? A what if is, what if the world could be different? What if, with Vaughn, when she was doing her work at PG&E, was what if our workforce within PG&E could be reflective of the people that we serve, instead of it being all white men over 50, which is pretty much the company at the time when she joined, and yet looking at the people that they served across California, what if our workforce could match? That's the big what if question that she was dealing with. Everybody that I have met who's a thought leader has this big what if question. And I don't think about it from the frame of vision, because vision sounds a little too scary. If I use that word vision too early in my journey, I can often get scared away. But this idea of a what if question, here's how it turned out in my career. As Maya mentioned, I started an organization called the Forum for Women Entrepreneurs. I was working in the technology industry, and I started this organization with my friend Jennifer Gill. There you see here in the picture. And this was in the early 90s. And we were looking at reality, a very sad and unfortunately almost unchanged reality, which is that women were not getting very much venture capital funding. At the time, it was less than 1% of the venture capital funding was going to women entrepreneurs. And we had this idea of what if women could have 50%. I mean, I wasn't greedy. I didn't want 51%, but I really believe that we should have 50%. We started this organization, grew it to a number of chapters around the country, and then next we started a venture conference called Springboard. Springboard was a 3-month boot camp program that actually put women through their paces to really learn about how to raise venture capital, and then we put them in front of investors. That program has now been going on for 14, 15 years and has helped 565 women raise over $6.5 billion in capital for their companies. So this was an idea. It wasn't just what if someday the world could be better. It was actually being in action around this activity and trying to move the needle. But I'll tell you from a personal perspective, and I like to tell people this, I became an accidental thought leader as a result of this change. I was not building this organization in order to put myself out there. I was building an organization to help women entrepreneurs. And I think many thought leaders begin that way. They begin by making change. And then over time, people start to notice. So in my case, as we launched the Springboard Conference, started getting a lot of calls from the media, a lot of chances to get out and tell the story. And that's what helped us scale both the conference and the organization to multiple cities, started getting media attention and awards and invitations to all kinds of amazing opportunities to have a seat at the table to really begin to make a bigger difference for women entrepreneurs. And that is my journey for really this idea of becoming this well-known expert in my niche. I want to talk now about your journey. So why do you want to be a thought leader? So if you'll jump in on the Q&A and tell me your thoughts, like what would be in it for you? What are some what if questions that you're addressing? How would you want the world to be different from your perspective, in your industry, in your community, in the work that you're working on, whether it be women's leadership, as it has been for me, women's entrepreneurship? What are some of the things that you guys are working on? I know somebody mentioned developmental disabilities. What are some other things that you guys are working on? If you could jump in and give me some thoughts, that would be very helpful. This what if future, for some people, it's very much the future that says, I want a world that looks like this. I want a more fair world. I want a world where the chance for more women to be involved in politics. I think that was certainly the idea behind Emerge. There was so many different reasons that people do this work. So here's one. What if every person and family had a home? That was somebody gave as their reasoning. So what does some of the rest of you think? Why would you want to do this? Well, that what if, thank you to the person who put that in, that is very much something that would motivate all of us here. I'm seeing if anybody else has jumped in here. So please, don't be shy. Tell us what your thoughts are. What if here? What if the world had more equality of opportunity? Is another person's answer. That is certainly something. I'm interested in a more creative and entrepreneurial options for older women, says somebody. I'm running a nonprofit to empower women in North Carolina. I'm hoping to activate women across the state to get engaged in some way. So this is another one with diversity and inclusion somebody is working on. Another is trying to find their niche to figure out how to help women run for office and girls run for office. Another is thinking about diversity issues as well. Another one says, I want to push the conversation forward. So thank you. These are all, another one's working with young Latina girls and thinking about how can we help young Latina girls see themselves in decision-making positions. Another one is working on holistic community revitalization. Another is working in policy and looking at the root cause level. What if health in all policies were law? Another is interested in educational outcomes, food security. Thank you. You guys are fabulous. Behavioral health. These are all things that can get people out of bed in the morning to really take this journey to become a thought leader. So here's some of the ideas I heard when I went across the country talking about my book. I heard that people wanted more influence, as you guys want. They want to have influence on equal pay, on the lives of women, on underserved populations. Others wanted to have impact. They really wanted to move the needle. Others really looked at it as income. That's not something to be shy about. If you are a thought leader in your niche, you can often move to broader income possibilities as people maybe you to a bigger job or to serve on a board or to speak and be paid for that. And other people are working on their legacy. They're 20 years into their career, 15 years into their career, and they're thinking, what am I leaving behind? What's going to be my legacy as I move forward in my career? Or they're leaving one career and they're moving to another, and they think about thought leadership from that perspective. I think of it as career insurance. I honestly do. I mean, I've been working with women leaders for 20 years now. I just, to me, the most fun is to work with women leaders to really move from leader to thought leader. And what I see when they do that is this unbelievable amount of career insurance. We all buy health insurance, but nobody's ever sold me career insurance. But this idea of being known in your niche, being somebody that others can identify as the go-to person, being someone that everyone knows is really making an impact in whatever their arena is, that's career insurance, because people do hire those folks. People want those kind of people on boards and involved with their communities. So that's, for me, the main reason why you should do this, but there's many, many good reasons. So where do you start? I think this is always a good question. For some of you guys are just beginning and others are a little further along. Let me see if I can give you some ideas about what to do here. I believe that it begins, and sort of the first chapter of my book, I really created this book to be a blueprint, step by step, 7 steps. Here's how you do this. And the first step and the first chapter is really about this idea of finding your thought leadership intersection point. How do you align your credibility, where you have your street cred, as it were, with what you're committed to and what you have experience doing? So credibility might be a degree, or it might be a certificate, or something that is actually something somebody can point to. An experience is just you've walked the walk, you've walked in others' shoes, or you've worked with this kind of community. That's the experience you bring. And third is this idea of being passionate or committed to something. The idea of becoming a thought leader in your niche is, I really will say, it takes some time and effort. So if you don't have some commitment in moving something forward, you're not really going to be willing to stay with it long enough to make a difference. So I always invite people to choose a niche where they can make a difference. Now, I'm not saying you can only have one niche. I'm not saying that at all, because many of us will have more than one. But I always invite people to begin at that point of where do we have the strongest overlap, and then build on that from there. So one of the exercises in the book is really about, how do I do this? How do I figure out that niche? And I really think that's a great place to start. So if you're really struggling, look for that section in the book. And I also have some worksheets that I'm going to send you after to help you do this. Next thing I think is this idea of finding your imperative. So Katie Orenstein, some of you guys may be familiar with Katie. Katie runs the Op-Ed Project. That's her facing us on the right there. And she really created the Op-Ed Project around this idea that more women's voices need to be heard on the op-ed pages, more on Huffington Post and other important blogs, but also in the op-eds. Her imperative was really this sense that if we do not have women's voices weighing in on the important issues of the day, then all of the decisions that are being made as a result, the policies and legislative changes and things that are underway in communities, are not being affected and impacted by women's voices. So the critical component that she talked about was this finding your imperative and using your voice in a way that moves ideas forward. So when I spoke with her, I interviewed her for the book, I really learned a lot about this idea of finding your imperative and using your voice for good. And I couldn't agree more with the importance of why that matters. But I also learned, as I was doing this, is this sense that we have to nurture our own lion, because our inner lion can often be this voice. I started calling it, because one of my clients calls it this. She calls it the itty bitty shitty committee shows up in our brain. I don't know if you guys have one of those, but I have a really loud voice that constantly is in the background saying, oh, you can't do this, or why do you think you're an expert in that? And anybody else, weigh in here. Does anybody else have that committee showing up in their brain? But this idea of how do we, if we're going to take our first steps, one of the first steps is to nurture that inner lion that wakes up in the morning, and instead of seeing the little kitty cat in the mirror, the little kitten in the mirror sometimes, instead sees that lion and feels like, I do have a voice. I really do have a purpose. Often it's by focusing on that future, that what if message that can enroll other people and engage other people, but can also get us out of bed. Other is to surround yourself with people who are like-minded and equally believe in what you believe in. So yeah, thank you, Helene. She wrote, she wrote it, I am woman, hear me roar. Absolutely. This is the sense that I want to give to everyone. If I could just inspire that energy and enthusiasm about our ideas. But another one says that committee made an appearance in my brain today. I mean, that committee will show up regularly. So this community, building community around thought leadership and nurturing ourselves is what's required. So let's now, I don't know if we can get the poll here coming up the second time, but let's just weigh in. We've been doing well on the Q&A. So tell me what holds you back. I'll tell you, while you guys are putting in your input, I'll tell you what held me back. I got this opportunity to write the book, and it was such a gift. But of course, my committee showed up in full force the day I got the contract. And I'd been writing pretty regularly. I'd been making progress on the book, and then literally the contract appeared in my hand, fully signed. And I literally stopped writing that day. And for 6 weeks, I had only a few month deadline, but for 6 weeks, I didn't write a word. And I tell this story now in public because, it's something I usually would want to hide. But I became so terrified that this book wasn't going to be good enough that for a while, I really just stopped writing. And fortunately, I'm in a group with 2 other women authors, and they showed up at my house for our regular meeting, and they both looked at me and said, okay, what's going on? Because I wasn't enthusiastic and excited, which is what they'd expected. I was a little terrified. And through a day of input from them and really sort of helping me see their process and how they move forward, I feel like they kind of smacked me upside the head a bit and said, okay, Denise, you've got a book contract. You have a contract, which means you're being paid to write this book. You need to sit down and write it. And that actually helped me get over my perfectionism or my over perfectionism. So let's hear from you guys. I'm loving that you guys are jumping in here. Thank you so much. One person said time. I absolutely hear you. Another said, I had a standing committee in my head, and it sounds like it's not a positive one. Time and encouragement holds back many of my ideas, says another person. Another person said fear of failure, or another is I have so many interests, it feels like it's limiting to be known for only one thing. Or I worry about money. I don't move in affluent circles, and the idea of raising 250,000 or 500,000 really seems like a showstopper. Or fear of not being good enough. Feeling overwhelmed at all the elements of being a thought leader, all the different things that it takes on top of my regular work. Another said time. Another said choosing the right project. The notion that once you hit a certain age, your ideas are outdated by definition. Or I want to do this the right way. Or another says that, let's see, I think that there is someone else who knows more than I do. Okay, so first of all, I love you guys. You're fabulous, because these are absolutely the things we're all thinking and feeling. That we all feel like there's not enough time. We all feel like I have to know all of it before I can get started. Or maybe I'm too old, my ideas are too old, or I'm too young and no one's going to listen to me. I can't figure it out. I have too many niches, or I don't have a niche. All of this stuff. Let me just take a breath. Everybody take a breath with me. And realize this is normal. Okay, all of these feelings, all of this sense of uncertainty and doubt and questions and time and not knowing all of it, this is the normal journey. This is the normal journey. And all I can say in honor and respect for where you're all feeling is that we've all been there with you. Every thought leader that I interviewed, every person that I've worked with, we've all gone through those same feelings. And all I can tell you, and if I can just give one piece of advice, and you've heard it 1,000 times, this is not so original, but it is this idea of one step at a time, to recognize that there's others who are on the journey, and really honestly speak it out loud to people. One of the things I've learned from coaches in the past that I've worked with is that the more we hide our fears, the more we doubt and keep them quiet, the more they overpower us and really dominate and control us. The more we talk about them with each other, then we start to strategize. We start to brainstorm. We share best practices. We start to create possibilities. So my invitation, and what I love about you all jumping in here, is that realize that you're not alone, A. B, that you can talk about it, and C, that you can strategize and brainstorm with other people who are on a similar journey. Most of us, if we have not enough time, I always invite in the book is to this sense of 20 minutes. Start with 20 minutes, maybe 20 minutes a day, 20 minutes a week, whatever you can comfortably do. Find one particular activity that you can work on. And this sense that we don't have to know everything, and we don't have to know it all, and we don't have to do it all right away is really critical. The other that I'm hearing is, we have a lot of excuses, or I don't have a plan. So we need to take that time. Like anything we take on, it is too big until we start to break it down and slice it up. So let me give you some specific things you can do here. I really believe that one of the most important pieces about thought leadership is to start by being discoverable for where we are today. So I think of LinkedIn as being the biggest gift to thought leaders or potential thought leaders or budding thought leaders, that this idea of being able to articulate what is it that we care about? What is it that we've already done? What is it that we're working on? What community is our peeps, as it were? Where's our people? Finding them on LinkedIn, but also being brave enough to have a portfolio of information on our LinkedIn page so that people can actually discover us. I'm always amazed when I do programs like this, and I see so many different people's LinkedIn pages before I go on stage, and I often look at people's information, and 90% of the time it's pathetic. And yet, when people are trying to find someone else to partner with or ally with in a new activity, they would go on LinkedIn as one of the first places they would look for you. So I invite you to try LinkedIn. Another is to think about what is maybe some awards that I might nominate someone on my team to win, or my team itself or myself to win, or have somebody nominate me if I'm not comfortable doing it myself. Women leaders as a group fascinate me because we have already accomplished so much so many times, but we hold back from taking the credit or standing on the stage. And when I was honored a couple years ago 2 years ago for being this top 100 woman, this woman who nominated me wrote to me and asked me if she could nominate me. And I said, sure, here's the information you need to fill out the nomination. And she wrote back and she said, do you know that 50% of the people ignore the nomination email? I'm telling them I want to nominate them, and 50% of the time women don't even say yes. So I want to invite you to say yes this year to what you've already done and what you've already accomplished, and recognize that that is enough. And then you can build on it. That's where we begin. So maybe thinking to yourself, and if you want to jump in and answer, what can you do to be more discoverable this year? What's one place that you could either raise your hand in a meeting and share your idea? Where could you post something on your LinkedIn page or on your company website? Could you put out a blog? Is there something you can do to share your ideas in your community or your company or your organization? Let me tell you a story about a guy that has done this in such a fascinating way. This is Avinash. Now, Avinash is, at the time when he first began his journey from leader to thought leader, was an intuit, and he was running a team of one. He ran the search engine optimization team at the early days of search engine optimization. And the sense that he had was that this was hard. Search engine optimization tools at the time were really not effective and not useful, but he was required to go and install them, and he had all these problems. So he decided that this was something that he was going to go out and share. So he was invited to speak at a very small industry conference, and he talked very bluntly about what the problems were. And two people came up to him afterwards and said, you should write a blog about that. Now, you can imagine when you first get invited to write a blog, what's the first thing you say? I don't have enough time, I'm not expert enough, somebody's already out there saying it, all the things that you guys said. Those were what he said. So he decided to invite just a few people, maybe 15 people, friends, family, and colleagues, to read his blog. And he just decided to create it with one point of view in mind. And his point of view was this: always write something of value. That was the first part. And secondly, he used this term, which I love, that he created, which he called uncomplexify. What can we do to uncomplexify what we're doing? That is the core basis of thought leadership. If you can uncomplexify what you're doing, then you have the possibility of being of use to someone else, being of value to someone else. So he started this blog called Occam's Razor. And within 6 months of starting this blog, he's had people reading it from all around the world. He was approached by Wiley to write a book, compiling these blogs, and then over time wrote a second. Today, actually maybe a few months ago when I created the slide, he had 125,000 Twitter followers and 150,000 on Google, and he was headhunted to Google itself to be a digital marketing evangelist, I think is his title now. But he would tell you that it all started very simply. He wrote no more than 2 or 3 nights a week. He wrote after the kids were in bed. He said, I really wanted to stay married. He says, I was really busy during the day, but he thought, if I can write for half an hour, 2 or 3 times a week, and really put down what's happening, then I can be of value to others. So that's his story, and your story may look different. But being a content creator, that to me is one of the key ways that we can do thought leadership. So content creating might be using some simple tools. Hootsuite is the tool I use for putting up all my Twitter and Facebook posts and whatever. I use the tool Canva for creating. I want to give you some of the basics of some of the things I use. Canva, which is a fabulous online tool for creating beautiful images, for doing PowerPoints, or for creating Facebook page images. So if you want to put something out in the world that looks like your brand, using some of these tools, Snagit, which allows you to capture things online and repurpose them in different ways, and a new tool, which I haven't tried yet, which I've put on the bottom there, which seems like a very easy version of some of the much more elaborate tools out there. So I thought I'd share that if you guys are thinking about how do you put your ideas out there. Blogs are very simple. I always use WordPress, but if you're getting more fancy and you're trying to add images, these are some of the tools that I use. Or if you're trying to get trying to build a following. The next thing you could do is be an amplifier. So what's an amplifier? This is Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris, and some of you guys may know her. She's based up in the northern part of San Francisco, in the southern part of San Francisco, and she's working on child health. And she learned about a study that talked about children who lived in the really bad areas of the really inner city of San Francisco. And she kept seeing them as her patients and realizing that there was a consistent set of illnesses and trauma and problems that were happening to these kids. And she found this study that really explained that children who were faced with parents in jail, or getting shot at on the street, or having no safe environment, were actually showing various symptoms medically. And she became an amplifier for this study, and she began to not only spread this idea through speaking, but she started her own research center over time, where she has become this one woman, and then of course others, really amplifier of this sense that we have got to treat children not as just ADHD patients, but as potentially the victims of trauma and PTSD as a result. So somebody said they viewed her TED Talk. I highly recommend it. She's very compelling. But this was not her idea, right? This wasn't something she discovered. So you can be an amplifier for other people's ideas. So I want to invite you to think, who's making a difference in the world that you're working in, and try to be an amplifier for those ideas elsewhere. So this piece here, you could do this in so many different ways. For me, thinking if you have a blog, inviting others to be guest bloggers on your site so that you invite the experts to come and blog with you. You could start a podcast. This, wonderful new frame of everybody following podcasts lately has been that you can actually invite guest speakers to amplify their ideas and really build not only a following for these ideas, but also a real ally as you're showcasing other people's ideas. You can also use Twitter lists. I use Twitter lists to create lists. If you just go Google on there, how do I create a Twitter list? I create Twitter lists of people in different arenas that I care about, and I follow those ideas, and then I retweet the ones that I want to amplify. So thinking about amplifying, that's another very useful tool for thought leadership and another way to be known. Third, you can be a convener. So Von Quinlivan, the woman I mentioned earlier that I've worked with, she was not allowed to do social media when she was at PG&E, and so she had to come up with a different model. And her model was to be a convener. She started to bring people together in her industry who had the same job as she did in other companies. So she was doing workforce in her company. She brought workforce people from lots of different industries together, and from lots of different companies together in her industry. And they began to share best practices. And this began to be the way that she shared her ideas and built her following. So thinking about yourself as a convener, what are some ways in which you can convene? When Sheryl Sandberg, she convenes thousands and thousands of people every day without actually attending by creating lean-in circles. You can create task forces to actually bring people together to weigh in on an idea. You don't have to have all the ideas yourself. You can create a Google Hangout, a really simple way to share ideas with other people. This is how you build on your expertise and also share knowledge and best practices. You can create your own mailing list. These might be people that want to listen to your ideas, but also where you can share, again, amplify other people's ideas. You can create a LinkedIn group. One of my clients has got a great LinkedIn group on digital health that he's been getting more and more followers. So these are all simple ideas for how to be a convener. You can also create frameworks. So this is the fourth idea, and I think it's my last idea here for today because I want to take some questions. But this idea of creating frameworks, one of the most important learnings for me as I was writing this book is that the real way to scale, the real way to create followers is to create a blueprint for them to follow. Some of you may be as familiar as I am with Chip Conley, was the CEO of Joie de Vivre Hospitality, a hotel chain started in the Bay Area, boutique hotel chain. And he's probably one of the most honest speakers I've ever heard. He always wants to share everything that happened. And when he was running this hotel chain, they faced two unprecedented, once-in-a-lifetime downturns in a very short period of time. And he was hit by September 11th, and then it was one economic downturn. I think actually maybe even two major economic downturns, and just lots of issues. And the company came so close in many cases to going under, and he shares that whole story. And as a result, what he learned was that he needed to create a different model for running his company. And this framework that you see on the screen, where he put customers, employees, and investors on the same path, equally valued. And he created this loyalty and culture that where at the heart was equally valuing all three of those, allowed him to sustain his company. But then he went out and he created a framework so that he could share both the joy of what happened, but also this possibility for others. And by creating a framework and being able to explain it in books and speeches and so on, others started to build on it. Tony Say of Zappos has built his company on the same model as a result. And I think about this as critical to thought leadership. So as you're thinking about this coming year, what are ways in which you can build a blueprint or a framework around the work that you're doing or that you want to have happen? Other options for this coming year, maybe being a curator, thinking about, maybe I could curate the best information and ideas for others. I can support another thought leader. I could advise a thought leader. I could even be an idea generator. Maybe I'm not ready to get out on stage or to take to the airwaves, but maybe I have a lot of good ideas in my field, and I could work with someone else who does like to be that front person and be that role. So these are all options for ways to move yourself forward as a thought leader. So let me now hear from you guys. I've been talking for a while. How are you going to take your next steps? What are some ways in which you think somebody wrote in already saying, this gave me the impetus I need to do an op-ed on LinkedIn and send it into the newspaper. Thank you so much to Helene for that. I'd love to hear from the rest of you. I've given you a ton of ideas. I mean, I have always a ton of ideas, but that's not really the point today. I really want to hear from you. What would be one small step you might take? Yes, you're busy. Yes, there's lots of work to be done. Yes, you're not an expert enough. And we can all spend a lot of time on what holds us back. But I want instead now to actually hear from you on what might move you forward. What is it that the sense of I can move something forward this year. So when one person says, I'm going to use my blog that has been fallow. So some of us, absolutely, we start blogs, we don't always keep them going. So what are some things you're going to do? Okay, here's somebody who's going to write her blog and move a blog post forward. That's just a great way to share your ideas. I really love this idea on LinkedIn, being able to not just write something, but then send it out to the world and have other people be able to comment on it and share it more widely. That's a really useful tool. So I hope some others of you will jump in here. Another says that I'm going to write an op-ed as well. I'm going to set up Hootsuite and start tweeting out maybe my ideas. I'm going to explore LinkedIn, says somebody else. I'm going to share items through LinkedIn. These are great tools. And what I love is, a few people a few years ago, there wasn't any way to get our information out there. So it's this idea of all these fabulous ways right at our fingertips. Sometimes it feels overwhelming and scary and crazy making, but I really look at it as the tools that allow us to be empowered. Another person said they're going to push past the negative comments and reach out to make meetings that I need to gain more visibility and traction. I have to get more visible about my intention to run. So I realize you don't have to be perfect for these meetings, but I can invite other thought leaders to help me move it forward. Thank you, Beth. Great thinking on that. Another is going to put their first update on LinkedIn and start blogging. Get over the fear of making my ideas public. We all have that fear. I'll tell you, we all have that fear. So yes, we need women's voices. We need all of your voices. Another, attempt to write a personal mission statement that I can use to focus myself. Liz, I love that. That's a great idea. Maybe someone else wants to join her. Another is working on sustainability and communication plans. So that's a great way to start. Just make a plan. If you only have 20 minutes, put the plan in place. Like, what are the next 3 steps? Another says, I'm going to buy your book. Okay, Rose, you get extra credit for that one, but commit time each week to begin my process towards being a thought leader in my community. Another one is, I'm going to use the webinar as a catalyst to accept more speaking engagements and invitations to serve on panels. Sometimes I decline because I don't feel expert enough. I hear that a lot, and none of us feel expert enough. If we get over the thinking about it being about us, let me just answer that one and say, this is really about sharing expertise in order to engage, to be of service, to be of help to other people. Share what you do know. You don't have to know everything. Take a few. I only have 4 ideas here today and tried to give some specifics around those ideas. You must have 4 ideas about what you already know. Another one said, I'm going to write some op-eds, take LinkedIn seriously, finish the ones I have in process here. I've already answered questions through one medium. I'm going to copy them over to Twitter and my blog. Very, very, very useful. I think this idea of retweeting and repurposing our content in multiple ways. I'm a big fan of Twitter. Not everybody is, but if you write a blog and then put it on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and all of the different places, you don't have to write thousands of things. Think about lean in. That's like one idea that was repurposed multiple ways, and then built the content and the value and the blueprint behind that. Somebody says, figure out how to stop the perfect from being the enemy of the good. Wow, Elizabeth, I always need help on that one too. I mean, this is just such a challenge for all of us, that we have this bar that keeps going up in our heads that says, I have to be perfect before I even start. There is no perfect. And that was really my big learning. I love to tell a part of the story that says, I was so frozen on writing my book that I watched every episode of The West Wing, because, that's what you do when you have a book contract. You watch every episode of The West Wing. Well, of course it isn't, but that's what I did. And it was because of this perfect story. So I invite all of you to let go of that perfect and just keep moving forward. So what kind of questions do you guys have for me? I've asked you a lot of questions, and I really appreciate that. But if you have questions for me, now's the time to jump in with a few of them here. I really love to answer those. I think I've been trying to look at some of the things you've been saying and see what the questions are that are buried in here. This idea of, how do I get started is really, it is to commit. Build the plan, set aside some time this year, let go of the perfect. These are all ways. Find others to move things forward with you. I love this idea of creating a little mastermind or a group of people that can meet regularly to share ideas and best practices, like, let me read your op-ed and I'll comment on yours if you comment on mine, or, when you put something on LinkedIn, I'm going to share it with other people. That, creating a little connected community to do that. Or, maybe you're somebody who wants to curate a newsletter, get people to send you their ideas and their comments. This is okay. I think that Maria's question is, how do you push back when others question your ideas? I think that's what you're saying. This is a really important point. So how do you push back when others question you? I would say you don't. And I know that seems a little controversial. I think that questions are really a gift that helps us to see what of our ideas are resonating and what of our ideas are not quite yet there for people. The idea of getting questions really helps us refine. So it isn't necessarily about pushing back. It's about understanding why somebody has the question. When people have a question, often there's buried in there some piece of advice or suggestion, or maybe a little maneuver that you could take in order to encompass them into your movement, into your ideas. But the more we try to sort of bowl them over or bow them down because we are smarter or better, or, the less it works. So I don't know that you have to actually push back. I think you need to instead, for me, there's a whole chapter in the book about really building advocates for our ideas. And so much of that is about listening. I learned this in the world of startups. I spent a lot of my early career in startups, and so much of startups is about taking a kernel of a little bitty idea and then testing it. Think about Emerge. When Emerge started, I was in the first class. I didn't have it all worked out. A lot of it was testing the idea for the first time. And the Forum for Women Entrepreneurs, we didn't have it all figured out. Test. We knew that we wanted to do something big about the issue of women and venture capital, but we didn't even know how to do it. So we kept going out and talking to people. What would you do? How should we do this? What are the big problems? And we kept asking. And over time, we refined down to the 3 key things we could take on. Okay, here's another one. How do we argue against this is the way it's always been? I'll tell you, Von Toon Quinlivan could talk for an hour about this. She was working in a union environment at PG&E, 80% union, 100-year-old company. I always think if you could become a thought leader in that company, you could be a thought leader anywhere, because that was their answer. This is the way it's always been. We've always done it this way. And so she was always focusing. She tried to create a future for people that they bought into. You're not going to win over everybody, and especially at a company like that. But what she realized is it was a kernel of her message aligned to other people's message. So in her case, she was working on diversity. She was trying to bring in a more diverse community. And what she tried to do was align to a lot of people who are having trouble with hiring. They were just having trouble with hiring, not just hiring diverse people. So those people she could get on board because she was trying to create a new channel to new employees with the right skills, and actually create a program that built those skills before they applied. So what you want to do, and why I'm telling you that as your answer, is you want to look for people who there's a slice of what you're doing that they can align with. They may not get the big tent, they may not understand the whole story, but which slice of what you're doing could they align to? And that actually helps with the getting over this is the way it's always been, helping them to sell the future. That's what I would say is that possibility. It's only by getting people excited by a big vision that we can get anyone off the way it's always been done. Because, by the way, they know that the way it's always been done isn't always perfect. But nobody likes to change. Another one said, do you have an example of people who become known for one thing and then shifted it to a different focus without losing their audience? So Liz, I would say that the answer to that is that it's not so much about losing your audience as building on your audience. So let me think about somebody who, actually Avinash is a great example. So Avinash started his work in search engine optimization, and he really broadened it. And I would say that's the most effective way to shift focus, is to broaden your story. So here I was working on this niche. Now I'm broadening it to a more broad perspective. So for myself, I worked with women's entrepreneurship, and I broadened it to women's leadership. So if you can do that, that's the best way, I think, so to build a broader umbrella under which your work can still hold the same audience, but also to recognize that you will lose some people. And that's okay, because part of thought leadership is also about passing the baton. You can't always spend your career doing, I mean, I think about Gloria Steinem working on feminism issues for 50 years. We're not all going to be that. We're not always going to focus on the same thing. So being able to sort of pass the baton to a group of people that can keep going with that work and move on to the next, it doesn't matter so much about losing your audience then if you're working on something else big. Some of those people will come with you regardless, and some won't. But if you can broaden the umbrella, that's the best. Another one says, when you're finding your niche, how do you be hyper targeted and focused when it is, when you have so many passions, ideas, and are involved in so much in our communities? Roseanne, I couldn't agree with you more. I even wrote in my chapter about that because I myself have that struggle. I'm passionate and excited about a lot of different things. And so how do you pick a niche? What I would say, the way to pick a niche is to realize, first of all, you just want to start with one niche. It doesn't mean you can't have three. It doesn't mean you can't have three even at the same time. But not that I would advocate that. Let me just stop and say that. But I would say you want to pick a niche where you're the most committed and the most distance, as it were, between where we are today and where the world needs to be, because that often is where people stay committed. We are passionate about a lot of things, but probably only a few of them do you think that we can move the needle. Here's a frame that Robin Chase of Zipcar gave me when I was doing the book. She started using this frame that I loved. It's called the highest and best use. You know, there's a lot of work that needs to be done in the community. There's a lot of change that needs to happen. But there's certain things that we are the best person to work on. We have the background, we have the commitment, we have the credibility and the experience. And nobody else has that sweet spot, that overlap. That's where we should work. And that was, it comes from the frame from the world of city planning, that you don't put the city dump in the center square of the city, that the highest and best use for that center square is a library or the city hall or a park, that's the best for everyone. So similarly thinking about us as individuals, we have a set of expertise and credibility that we can play. And if I was going to focus you as a thought leader, pick the one where it's highest and best use for you to make a difference and move the needle. That is where it's worth really spending the time and energy. Here's another question. I frequently get bogged down in making it replicable. How do I get people to follow along without having to write it all down? Yeah, okay. Another one. I love these questions because these are all questions I had. We may not be the person. We may not be the person to make it replicable. We may need other people. I am the person who likes to start things. I don't like to be the one that writes it all down and documents it. Writing this book, it's a 7-step blueprint. It really was a struggle for me because I'm a girl who just wants to go on to the next thing. But when I realized that I did have a process and I did want to share it more widely, that's when I got down to writing the book. And my book coach said, you need bum glue. You need to glue your bum to the chair and get that thing written. That was really because I wanted this broader impact and I wanted to share these ideas in a way that I could not personally be with everyone that I wanted to share it with. But sometimes we need help. We need a curriculum developer, or we needed a ghostwriter. I believe in hiring all the talent you need because making it replicable may not be your skill set. It may be harder. Let me see. I think I have one more question here before we close. Let's see if I missed anybody. I get annoyed when people, usually men, hold themselves out as experts when they really aren't. It really seems to be a question of effective self-promotion. I agree, Helene, it is about effective self-promotion, that this sense that we are not supposed to be beating our chests about how incredible we are. The frame that I use about thought leaders is the difference between an expert and a thought leader is that experts are all about, hey, look at me, I'm so smart, I know everything, look at how incredible I am. But thought leaders are about making you smarter. They're about making the rest of the world smarter by sharing their blueprints, their frameworks, their best practices. If we can keep that top of mind, I think that just lets go of all that self-promotion aspect and realizing that we're of service. We are trying to share our knowledge so that others don't have to reinvent the wheel or do it differently. So let me close with this last quote here, and that is that, thought leadership is not about being known. it is about being known for making a difference. And really, if I could leave you with something to think about, is to really think for yourself, where will you make a difference this year? Where is your highest and best use? Where are the things that you care enough about to devote your time and energy to taking this journey from leader to thought leader? If there's one thing I could wish for all of us, is that we really can look back at our careers and realize that we moved the needle on something, that we have made some initiative that was about being known for making a difference. So many of the women I've met through Emerge are those people, and I really honor and respect each of you for being that person in your community, in your company, in the world that you're taking on. So my hope is that you'll go away from this saying, I'm going to be more discoverable this year. Looking around you and saying, is there a colleague? Is there somebody on my team? Is my company need to be more discoverable this year? And really devoting some energy and time to that. What can you do to amplify the ideas of others around you? And then if you could, help me be more discoverable. If you love the book, if you get a copy of the book and leave me a review on Amazon, of course, I love that. I love to get out and speak. Speak at conferences and companies and everywhere that I can about these ideas, because I really solidly believe we need particularly more women thought leaders, and I want to move that forward. So if you want to join my mailing list and receive what I have, this fabulous thing called the Thought Leadership Manifesto. I have some worksheets that are tied to the book that you can also use separately. Drop me an email, send me a note. You can also follow me on Twitter. You'll see my Twitter handle at the bottom. Connect with me on LinkedIn. But you can find me at denise@thoughtleadershiplab.com. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for the great input and questions. See you next time.